Welcome to Her Success Matters, a podcast exploring how advisors can work together to build a pathway for women to succeed in financial services. I am your host, Nadine Chakar, Chief Executive Officer of InvestmentNews. This podcast will give you rare insider access to the top financial services executives who are taking action to break down the barriers for the next generation of female advisors. You will also hear from some amazing and inspiring women who have forged their own pathway to success. Welcome to Her Success Matters. I'm excited to be joined by one of the most powerful women in finance, Nadine Chakar, Executive Vice President and Head of Global Markets at State Street. In this episode, we will learn about Nadine's journey as a woman in financial services and how Nadine is working to build a more inclusive future for all women. State Street is a leading global provider of financial services to institutional investors. Nadine presides over a 1,600-person division at State Street Global Markets. In her role, she oversees all aspects of global markets, trading, product, and operations platform, helping to drive successful client solutions. Nadine is also an active member of State Street's global diversity efforts. Nadine, we are so thrilled to have you join us today. Welcome to Her Success Matters.
Christine, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here as well. So thank you.
You're very welcome, and we're thrilled to have you as our guest today. And let's start at the beginning. So what makes this podcast so important is hearing the personal stories and the journeys of our guests. Let's start at the beginning and tell us about you and your background.
I've been lucky enough to be raised in two different parts of the world. I was born in the U.S. I grew up in Beirut, Lebanon, in the middle of a civil war. So wow. It is true. If it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. So whoever said that definitely was onto something. But in all seriousness, it was a great place to grow up, surrounded by family, a good sense of belonging. And around university time, I came back to the U.S. I chose Boston. I had some family here and went to school. Graduated in 1987, and actually I joined State Street. That was my first job out of school, right before the big financial crash that occurred in October 1987. And it's been an incredible journey that took me all over the world. I spent most of my career at a competitor, and then in 2019 came back home to State Street. It's been an exhilarating journey in between.
Wow. So from Boston to Beirut, back to Boston, and then you start at State Street and come right back there. I love it. So tell me a little bit about how your international background helped you in terms of your role currently at State Street.
Quite a bit. People's careers, I know mine it was truly enabled by luck and powered by a lot of hard work. And it's all sometimes being in the right place at the right time. In the mid to late 90s, I got the opportunity to participate in a business venture in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands. I went there. I ended up spending 7 to 8 years of my career that are just absolutely wonderful. But the ability to adapt, to be in a foreign country, to really build a business, just having that background of having lived in different places in the world was very helpful to be able to merge cultures, because I did run a joint venture between a Dutch and a U.S. organization. So the cultural fit was critical to the success. It's funny because you don't think of culture in those terms. It's one of these nice, warmy, touchy-feely type of subjects until you hit it head on and you realize that without having a good, solid culture, you really don't have a solid business foundation. And I would say that's been one of the anchors in my career and one of the greatest lessons learned in my background.
You know, it's funny, culture is a word we all throw around, but when you really dive into it, it can mean so many different things. And it's the single most important thing now in organizations, especially today during the pandemic and everything we've gone through. And I love that you had that international opportunity. I got to travel as a young woman in my career as well. And it makes such a difference when you get to meet people from all different parts of the world and understand what it's like to have people from just different backgrounds that maybe don't look like you or talk like you, but they can belong in every environment as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So Nadine, I'm curious, what was your first job at State Street?
And that brings back memories. So, Christine, I graduated from school, as I said, in '87, sent out of my CVs. State Street at the time was expanding in something called global custody. So I showed up to my interview. I got hired. I started my first day. In like literally for 6 months, I would go to work, come back at night, and my family would go, "What is it that you do?" I'm like, I don't know.
I don't know. I love that.
I don't really know. My dad would go, "But do you run money?" I'm like, "No, I'm pretty sure I don't do that. I know I don't trade." I take a piece of paper off the fax machine. I put it into a CRT. Now, I'm old enough that you remember these dumb terminals that would sit. You used to share 2 desks. There was a dumb terminal on a Lazy Susan. You would like spin it around, and I would like key punch whatever was on the piece of paper, and I would call back the client and say, "Hey, I got your instruction. I input it into the system," and boom, I was done. You're young out of college, and all you cared about was the after work parties that you had with all your friends that you made at work and stuff like that. It took me about 6 months to like figure out like, okay, I work in global custody. It's really I'm gonna, for lack of a better term, call it really the if the fund manager is the architect of an investment process, the custodian's and the engineer. Like we plug all the pipes together, we make things work. It took me a while, but it ended up. I promise you, Christine, nobody goes to school wanting to become a global custodian, but throughout my career, it's been great. I've learned all about technology. I've learned about operations. I've traveled the world, literally traveled the world. And today I get involved in a lot of cool stuff. That was my first job. We all have to start somewhere. For me, that's turned out to be a very valuable foundation for all the other things I've had the privilege and opportunity to do throughout my career.
That's amazing. And Nadine, I asked that question specifically because back in the early 80s, 90s, not to date us because I'm in that same category, but there weren't a lot of women working in financial services. So tell us a little bit about, first of all, you had to figure out exactly what your job was, but how do you have the confidence as a young woman to be in that environment, and tell us some of the experiences you had during that time?
I think, Christine, goes back to my upbringing, and if I think of the path that I took to come to the U.S., as I said, it was in the middle of the Civil War. It took about 3 days for me when I left Beirut. I had to divert through many European capitals to get to Boston. My English at the time wasn't that great, so you think through all the trials and tribulations you go through. So once you get to work. And I was very privileged, despite the fact of living in the Middle East. I don't think I've ever felt the difference between growing up as a girl or boy, or a female or male. It was not something I was very in tune with. So you go to work and you start your career, and like all of us, right? We were going to take over the world. We were going to put our mark on the world, and that's how I've attacked it. I would say though, when I moved to the Netherlands and I started, I was in a slightly more senior position. I think at that time I started to realize that I was usually the only woman in the room. Definitely the shortest, because as you know, the Dutch tend to be very, very tall.
They do indeed.
They're incredibly tall. So I was usually the only woman, usually the youngest person in the room. And I think that's when I started to realize, like, all right, like this is going to be a more of an uphill battle. But I was incredibly fortunate that I've had people around me. And we talk a lot about mentors and sponsors. And I've been very, very fortunate at a very early part of my career to have really people that have surrounded me, that gave me that extra push every so often, that believed in me when I did it. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think they've treated me any differently from my male counterparts. If anything, I believe I was given my fair share of opportunities. And I am incredibly grateful for that. And that's why every day I try to pay it forward, because I remember every day in my career that somebody took a chance on me, made the path a bit easier for me. And that's what we strive to do today. I've been fortunate. I wouldn't say that my path was the same as a lot of people, but I think it's just sometimes being in the right place at the right time, and most importantly, surrounding yourself with really, really good people around you that truly cared.
And that in itself says a lot about you. I mean, well, one, luck is absolutely part of it, but so is hard work, right? And then, as you spoke about, the ability to live in an international environment certainly helps. I know I benefited from that sort of experience personally as well. You talked about mentorship as well as sponsorship. Can you think of any particular mentor that really helped you along the way? And what was it about that mentoring that gave you that extra boost of confidence to go forward?
There's a gentleman, our relationship started when I was at the Boston company. So this is when I left State Street. I joined a company that was called the Boston Company. I don't know if you're from Boston, the headquarters, I could actually see it from my window right now. The Boston Company ended up being bought by Mellon Bank and eventually by merged with Bank of New York Mellon. He was my boss's boss at the time, eventually became my boss, became a mentor, a sponsor, and today we're pretty good friends. And despite the fact that he's retired and really doing something else with the new chapter in his life, I will tell you, Christina, the height of the crisis that we've been facing, I would also like in the March April timeframe, the markets were just going nutty, like absolutely nutty. You're dealing with a health crisis, you're dealing with a financial crisis. It was so cool to wake up one of these mornings and I'm sitting there with my hands on my head going like, all right, what next is going to hit me? I get a text message from him and it says, "You've got this. You've trained all your life for this. You've got this."
Oh,
And
I
remember
love that. I
it was
love that.
it was awesome. I remember looking at my phone, looking out on the trading floor, just smiling and going, "All right, let's go at it." We ended up having a very successful year, both in terms of taking care of the team as well as taking care of our clients. We're praying to God right now, the end is near, so we can all get back some level of normalcy in our lives. He's been a very important figure in my life. As you noted in my bio, after spending 25 years in one institution, in 2015, for personal reasons, I decided to come home to Boston. I had been in New York for a period of time. He's really the person. He's probably, beside my family, and probably he's probably the single voice that I debated the issues with. And at one point, I was moving in a direction where I ended up being with Manulife. For a moment there, I was waffling. There was another offer I was looking at. Then he goes, "What are you doing? Like, you told me this is really important to you." I'm like, "Yeah, you know what? You're absolutely right." So he's been that sounding board. He's been the person to try to get me back on course when I've deviated a little bit or got lost. I wish everybody could have somebody like that in their careers.
Thank you, Nadine, for sharing that, because there's a couple things about that is so important. The first thing is that all of us, no matter how much experience we have or what we know, having somebody who helps you, you can brainstorm, you can run ideas, you can have a moment of weakness is just what we need, right?
Absolutely.
So the fact that you have that, and I know a lot of leaders, myself included, I remember riding the subway home on March 11th going, I have a big decision to make. And what do I do? And, it's like it weighs on you.
Yep.
To have somebody you can bounce ideas off like that is so great. And also the fact that you said you pay it forward every chance you get. So I think as women leaders and as leaders, we have a responsibility to mentor people as well and to give them that confidence or that sounding board or whatever it is they need in a support system.
No, I agree. It's really important. It's really critical, and I do wish everybody will have the opportunity to find somebody like that in their professional lives.
So there's a lot we talked about, but I want to package that all into how does that shape how you lead and care about your team today in your role?
Christine, I think we all bring. We have professional lives and personal lives, and clearly our backgrounds, our values all sort of mush together, if you will, to make us the people that we are. Again, I believe my upbringing of somebody who's lived in a very tightly knit family. When I left and came alone, that was gut wrenching. But today I'm blessed to have them all around me. But having grown up in a family, with my family around me, with a Middle Eastern culture is very family driven. It's very, you take care of each other. That's how it works. I try every day to make sure that we have a very collaborative culture within our organization, that we do support each other. And usually traders in any market type of operation, you got, super competitive individuals that go hard at the markets every day. I would tell you during the pandemic, I actually witnessed the best in our people, the best our organization has to offer. And I think it really came through with the care and the support. We had to split up. Some of us continued to go to work every day. Some of us worked from home. When we saw our colleagues struggling under the weight of trying to homeschool and taking care of, or maybe not having enough space to have a good setup, you could see people just coming to each other's support in trying to get us through this. So I'd like to think that we run a flat organization, despite the fact we work for a bank where titles and hierarchy reign. I would say at State Street, we're pretty flat in terms of accessibility and availability. The support that the firm gave to all of us, that in turn we're able to provide to our teams and their families, was paramount. And also, there's no policy on good ideas. We all get together. We banter around ideas. And at the end of the day, I believe our team and State Street in general is as successful in the marketplace and innovative because we're powered by the ideas of our team. So we tend to be innovative, competitive, but mainly supportive. And this pandemic brought the best of our humanity, which I'm incredibly proud of.
Yeah, this pandemic obviously has been a tragedy in so many ways, but there's been so much good from humans coming out of it and how we operate and how we behave and how we treat people. It's interesting because you use the word flat, like a flat organization. And I actually think it's flattened out a lot of organizations because now there's no more like literal corner office where you have to be intimidated. You're in people's living rooms. You're seeing their home offices, in some cases, their bedrooms, depending on their space. You're seeing their pets, their kids, and it humanizes everybody. And I feel like I know more about the teams that work for me now than I ever did. So, and I'm sure you feel the same as a leader.
Oh, it was great. We got to meet everybody's families. We were in everybody's living room.
Yeah.
On Christmas, we did a gingerbread competition. It was great. And you got to see everybody's kids. Everybody's dressed up. There's also memories of, how we felt and how we treated each other and how we treated our communities, which will last a lifetime.
And that leads right into diversity, because as a world, we learned more about diversity and the fact that we're not going to tolerate a lack of diversity or inclusiveness, particularly in the work environment. So can you tell us more about State Street's Numerates Network program and how that promotes a more diverse and inclusive work environment?
Well, there's a couple of actions. Numerates, Christine, is more of I think it promotes a bit of inclusion in a way where, as you know, we're in an economy these days that's heavily technology driven, it's data driven, and we're seeing a lot of the skills of yesterday becoming obsolete very quickly. So the idea behind Numerates was really to allow our quants, so these are the guys that and women that deal with all these algorithmic trading, codes, all the things that I couldn't spell if my life depended on it, but really to provide an environment where anybody from any background, from any level of experience, that really wanted to participate in the new economy, for lack of a better term, to give them that opportunity, to network. And in my mind, and the intent here is it does promote job mobility. It provides better equality and access to new opportunities that's out there. And Numerates was also very important to allow us to also try to recruit more females, people of diverse backgrounds, because sometimes when I look on the trading floor, I don't see a lot of people that look like me, right?
Right.
It tends to be fairly male dominated. Historically, we're seeing a lot more progress there. But Numerates allows us to give people that opportunity, to give them the tools, the training, and the confidence if they're interested in pursuing a career in trading or in data sciences or in modeling, that makes it accessible to them. State Street also has done a lot of work, if you think through, and part of when I was prepping with Nicole, she goes, "Why State Street?" And I'll tell you what really changed my mind about State Street, in addition that it's run, and I tend to work with a lot of my old colleagues, which I enjoy and respect quite a bit, was the Fearless Girl campaign.
I love that campaign. I love that campaign.
And the fact that the company's gone out and really made such a bold and impressive statement, really, for me personally, it made a difference. And I know for all the people that we go out and recruit, it makes a difference. And after the tragic death of George Floyd, that was another milestone where, again, our CEO, Ron O'Hanley, the entire management team really took the lead on coming out with 10 actions on what do we need to do to fight racism and social injustice, and really double down on diversity, inclusion. We talk a lot about diversity, but inclusion is critical to make sure that people feel welcome, they feel they have a shot, they have the opportunity to go as far as their dreams will carry them and aspirations. So there's a lot of programs at State Street that allows us to do that. I'll tell you the grassroots efforts from the various employee networks and affinity programs that we have also is helping making us a more diverse in a better place for it. But we still, like everybody else, we still have a lot of work to do. But I am hopeful and very proud of the efforts that we're making. But it's an all out, we're all in, all 35,000 of us. This is not driven by a CEO. This is not driven just by our management committee or the board. It is driven by each and every one of us. And that's what I think will make a difference and will make us successful.
Yeah. And, we've learned a lot, and I have personally on this podcast from having these conversations, that I think everybody is now not just listening and talking about it, but taking action and taking personal responsibility. You see it all over the media, even most recently in the Chris Harrison on The Bachelor, right? It's like, we're just going to change how we operate. And if people are not making those changes, we're going to require that. Even in Investment News, we now have diversity index on speakers, and we've listened to some very powerful women get in touch with us and say, you got to do better. So we're like, you know what? We do. We have to put actions in place. So thank you for sharing what State Street is doing. And I love that your CEO had 10 actions, and that you feel it's all 35,000 of you who are rolling up your sleeves and doing it and taking action. That's amazing. What other actions do you think other companies in this industry should take in 2020 to continue on this positive momentum and have meaningful change?
I think this has been a big wake up for the financial services industry, Christine. And what I'm most proud about is the fact that it's been a grassroots effort, also driven by our youngest members in society, right? Like, they're demanding change, and you're seeing a lot of companies starting to respond to that. A lot of the components of our 10 actions are also being mimicked by other organizations out there. But I think at the end of the day is trying to break down the barriers, making sure that people have access to the same opportunities, regardless of backgrounds, color of your skin, and so on. So I think it's going to be critical for organizations to start to listen to this younger generation, because they're the people, right, that we're going to need to attract in order to continue to service our clients and grow our businesses. And they're not driven solely by money in professional aspirations. They're looking for that noble purpose. They want to be proud of the company they're working for. They want to make sure that they make an impact in their neighborhoods and in society. And I think that's what that is the right and moral thing to do, but also it's the right business thing to do if we're going to get this new generation to join the workforce and join us on this journey. They've made the difference, whether it's on diversity, whether it's been on climate change. Leave it to this generation to teach us a thing or two and help us progress and finally make the change that we all know needs to happen. And I think that we've all been yearning for it to occur. I think I'm optimistic. It's going to be a lot of hard work. I know we'll get there. The will is definitely there to get us there.
The will, the desire, the passion, and the purpose. And it also is why ESG is so important too, because people want to be affiliated and use companies who actually want to have a positive impact on the world. I know that's a big part of State Street's initiatives as well, is your focus on ESG. So that's amazing. Thank you for sharing all that. I want to just find out how listeners, or let our listeners know how they can get in touch with you, follow you on social media or State Street.
Both me and the company, State Street, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Twitter. I'm an avid user of LinkedIn, so please feel free to connect. You can send me questions. I'm very good at answering my emails, so please do so. And we have a very good social media program for State Street as well, both on Twitter and on LinkedIn.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing all of that, Nadine. And what I ask my guests, my final question to all my guests is, I would love for you to articulate in your words why you believe her success matters.
I mean, Christine, it's going to sound like a corny answer, but I totally believe in that. Is her success is everybody's success. I know I'm the beneficiary of that, and I do hope I'll be able to pass it on. I think every single study, every single piece of data shows that organizations that have more women in leadership, just look at the numerous articles that showed the countries that showed good COVID management versus the ones that haven't. They've all been led by women. So we do need more diversity. We do need more women in our ranks. It makes good business sense, but it's also the right and moral thing to do. In an incredibly fortunate position, and I do hope that I will continue to be able to forge the path for her success in years to come.
Well, based on your background, your story, and your success, you're certainly an inspirational example of her success really mattering, and how possible it is for every woman, no matter where they come from, where they grew up. And I love that you shared your story. So thank you for that, Nadine. I really appreciate it. And I know when we are back to normal, I can't wait to meet you in Boston, my hometown. We'll have to go have lunch and share all our stories.
You got it. There'll be a good bottle of wine waiting for you. So thank you all very, very much. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Her Success Matters. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available, and share this podcast with others that believe her success matters.
The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Investment News. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service providers with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.